Hi, I am here to offer you all an overview of what my dissertation focus is going to be. I will say that I have initially discussed these ideas with Dr. DeGennaro, and then I have explored my focus area in more detail in the qualitative inquiry class that I'm taking this semester with Dr. Walser. So, a large part of what I'll be sharing with you today is just how I've thought through this via the methods project that Dr. Walser assigned for us a few weeks back. So, in thinking about the topic that I want to explore for my dissertation, I want to look at how educational leaders define racial equity and how does that understanding impact equity and access for those who report to them. So, whether those are teachers or students, my current thinking is that I'd like to see how educational leaders' understanding of equity and access impacts the teachers and staff who directly report to them. Um, I'm interested in this topic because I want to understand how leaders create change for those who don't have access to opportunities and who are not treated in the same way as their privileged counterparts. So, by focusing on how leaders' understanding of equity and access impacts their teachers, in turn, that leadership and that impact that teachers are responding to will have an effect on students ultimately. Discussions around equity have been ongoing in education and many other industries for years. So, why is it that leaders have made little progress with dismantling and upsetting these imbalances, these dominant, subordinate, privileged, unprivileged imbalances? Is it because of the ways in which they are defining or viewing racial equity? So that's in large part what I'd like to take a look at. Um, for the methods project, I have started a very brief literature review, so a review of some of the literature around this topic. So in my review of different researchers and different articles around this topic, what I have noticed or some things that have become evident or some of the emerging trends based on the literature is that leaders have varying interpretations of what equity means in the context of leading a school or a district. Additionally, leaders usually have to make a judgment call with regard to upsetting the status quo or making drastic changes to policy and process that could potentially cause pushback from stakeholders. Finally, the literature also points to leaders needing to know the needs of their communities in order to lead for equity. So, what we don't know is why there are varying interpretations of equity among education leaders. We also don't know why years of research around this topic has shown little to no momentum with regard to reforming education practices in a more equitable way. Also, more research needs to be conducted around the best methods for leaders to use to assess the state of equitable access in their schools. And finally, why do education leaders believe they are making more progress towards equitable access than they really are? So, there is a couple of researchers that have looked more in depth at why the perception that some educational leaders have around the progress they're making is not reflective of what's actually happening in their school culture. So, based on the literature in terms of what we know around this topic and then what we don't know, I part of the process for this methods project for Dr. Walser was to use that gap in knowledge to generate a purpose statement. So the purpose or the initial ideas that I have around the purpose of my dissertation is to understand what shapes education leaders' understanding of equitable access for students. And so I ended the project with three research questions, and some of these questions are ones that I discussed with Dr. DeGennaro in our initial dissertation meeting. But the first question is, how are education leaders defining equity and access? How do education leaders perceive their restructuring of the status quo? And what kind of resources do education leaders believe they need to provide equitable access? So, given all of that, that's the main focus. I'm hoping that the first part of uh, kind of studying the context around this issue is to get a pulse on the community. And when I say community, I mean the school leaders. So, take a sampling of school leaders and really understand and gain some meaning around how they define equity, and then report those findings back to them. Have some sort of a discussion around um, what the emerging trends are in terms of how they're defining equity, and then possibly another thing that I discussed with Dr. DeGennaro is possibly curating some tools and resources to support these community leaders in creating access and equity. So that is pretty much the focus area that I'm looking to examine in my dissertation. And I look forward to hearing back from you all and getting feedback. And hopefully, this will help move forward the process in terms of, determining what my comprehensive exam will look like, and then determining what just the process of data collection and the study of context around the problem, um, just gaining some understanding around that. All right, thank you.